What would you do if you found out you were pregnant with two babies of different ages in the same cycle? This is the incredible story of Emma Carter, a mother who faced a rare condition called superfetation. Against all odds, she carried two miracles, Sophia and Ethan, conceived weeks apart. Emma's journey was filled with challenges, from medical complications to public scrutiny, but her unwavering love and determination carried her through. From the NICU struggles to their unforgettable first birthday, this tale of resilience and hope will inspire and move you. What are your thoughts on Emma's amazing story? Are you watching from the USA, Europe, or somewhere else? Share your views in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to DG Stories for more incredible tales of courage and miracles. Hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our next heartwarming story. The sound of the ultrasound machine filled the small examination room as Emma Carter lay on the table, her hands resting nervously on her growing belly. Ben, her husband, stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. It was their first pregnancy, and the excitement in the air was almost tangible. "This is it," Emma whispered, glancing up at Ben. "We're finally going to see our baby." The technician applied cool gel to Emma's abdomen and began moving the probe, the screen flickering with grainy black and white images. Emma and Ben exchanged an eager look as the technician's brow furrowed slightly. "Is everything okay?" Emma asked, her voice trembling with sudden unease. The technician hesitated before replying. "Let me get the doctor. I just need a second opinion on something." Emma's heart sank as she turned to Ben, her fingers tightening around his. "What does that mean?" Ben shook his head, his own smile fading. "I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe they're just being cautious." Minutes felt like hours until Dr. Caldwell, the obstetrician, entered the room. She greeted them warmly but had a serious expression that sent Emma's anxiety soaring. "Emma, Ben," Dr. Caldwell began, her tone calm but measured. "There's something unusual about your ultrasound. You're carrying two babies, but they're not twins." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. "Not twins," Emma echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Dr. Caldwell pointed to the screen, showing two distinct shapes. One baby is measuring at 12 weeks, and the other is at about 10 weeks. This suggests they were conceived at different times. Emma's head spun. "How is that even possible?" "It's extremely rare," Dr. Caldwell explained. "It's called superfetation. Usually, once a woman becomes pregnant, her body stops ovulating. But in rare cases like this, another egg is fertilized during a separate cycle, resulting in two pregnancies at different stages." Ben let out a low whistle, trying to process the information. "So, what does this mean for Emma and the babies?" Dr. Caldwell's expression softened. "It's not without risks. Carrying two pregnancies that are not in sync can pose significant challenges, including preterm labor and complications for both the mother and the babies. But with proper monitoring, it's possible to have a positive outcome." Emma instinctively placed her hands on her belly, her mind racing. Two babies, not twins. How could this be happening? Are they okay right now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "For now, they're both developing well," Dr. Caldwell reassured her, "but we'll need to monitor you very closely moving forward." On the drive home, Emma stared out the window, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and amazement. She and Ben had been overjoyed about starting a family, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. "How are you feeling?" Ben asked gently, breaking the silence. "Terrified," Emma admitted, "but also amazed." "Two babies, Ben. It feels like a miracle." Ben smiled, though worry lingered in his eyes. "A complicated miracle. But yes, we'll figure this out together." The news of Emma's rare pregnancy spread quickly. Close friends and family were astonished, some even skeptical. At a family dinner a few days later, Emma's mother, Linda, beamed with excitement. "Two little miracles," Linda said, already planning baby blankets for each. "You're going to need all the help you can get." But not everyone shared her enthusiasm. Diane, Ben's mother, frowned as she stirred her coffee. "Have you considered the risks?" Diane asked bluntly. "This isn't just about excitement. Emma, you need to think about your health and the long-term challenges." Emma stiffened, feeling Ben's hand on her shoulder. "I've thought about it every day," she said firmly. "But these are my babies. I'm not giving up on either of them." Diane sighed, clearly unconvinced. "I just don't want you to regret this later. Emma, sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." Emma excused herself, retreating to the kitchen as tears welled up in her eyes. She could hear Ben defending her in the other room, his voice low but resolute. "They're her babies. Mom, our babies. We're going to do everything we can for both of them." That night, Emma lay awake, her hand resting on her belly. She couldn't shake Diane's words from her mind, but she also couldn't imagine choosing between her children. "I don't know how we're going to do this," she whispered to Ben in the darkness. Ben wrapped an arm around her, his voice steady, "One step at a time. We'll fight for them, Emma, no matter what." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she would fight for her babies with everything she had. Emma Carter woke to the soft light filtering through the curtains and the now familiar fluttering in her belly. It had been 2 weeks since the news of her rare pregnancy, and she was trying to focus on the joy of carrying 2 lives instead of the ever-looming risks. But as her pregnancy progressed, Emma couldn't ignore the toll it was taking on her body. By her 16th week, the exhaustion was overwhelming. Simple tasks like walking up the stairs left her breathless, and the swelling in her legs worsened each day. "I feel like I'm carrying the world," she joked weakly to Ben one evening, but the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. "You need to rest more," he said, his voice firm. "We can hire someone to help around the house. Your health comes first." Emma nodded, though the thought of slowing down made her uneasy. She wanted to do everything right for her babies, even if it meant pushing through discomfort. At her next prenatal appointment, Dr. Caldwell's expression was kind but serious. "Emma, we need to talk about the strain this pregnancy is putting on your body," she began. "Your blood pressure is higher than I'd like, and the risk of complications like preeclampsia is increasing." Emma's heart sank. She had read about preeclampsia, a condition that could endanger both mother and babies. "What can I do to prevent it?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "Rest is critical," Dr. Caldwell said. "Avoid stress as much as possible, and we'll monitor you closely. If things worsen, we may have to consider early delivery." The words lingered with Emma long after the appointment. Early delivery, NICU stays, the possibility of losing one or both of her children. It was too much to bear. Meanwhile, the story of Emma's pregnancy had spread far beyond her small Colorado town. A local journalist had interviewed her after hearing about her case, and within days, her story was featured in a regional news outlet. First, Emma was touched by the outpouring of support. Strangers from across the state sent messages of encouragement, calling her a symbol of hope and resilience. But the positivity was short-lived. On social media, criticism began to surface, and it quickly grew louder. "She's putting herself and those babies at risk," one commenter wrote. "How selfish can you be?" Another added, "This isn't bravery, it's recklessness. She should have listened to the doctors." Emma sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the comments as tears blurred her vision. Ben found her moments later, her phone in her trembling hands. "Why do people think they have the right to judge?" she choked out. "They don't know me. They don't know what I'm going through." Ben wrapped his arms around her. "People will always have opinions, Emma, but they're not living this. Only we are. You have to focus on what matters, our family." At her next family dinner, Diane brought up the social media backlash. "Have you seen the comments?" she asked Emma pointedly. "People are worried, and they're not wrong. This pregnancy is dangerous. Maybe you should reconsider." Emma stared at Diane, her frustration boiling over. "Reconsider what? Giving up on one of my children? How could you even suggest that?" Because I care about you. Emma. Diane snapped back. What if something happens to you? What if both babies don't make it? This isn't just about hope. It's about reality. The room fell silent as everyone looked at Emma, waiting for her response. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking but firm. These are my babies. I will do everything I can to give them a chance, no matter what anyone else thinks. Diane sighed but said nothing more, and Ben reached for Emma's hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. As Emma's pregnancy continued, the physical toll deepened. By her 20th week, she struggled with debilitating back pain and near-constant fatigue. Her body felt like it was working overtime to keep up with the needs of her two babies, and the stress of public scrutiny only added to the burden. One morning, she woke with a pounding headache and a wave of dizziness so severe that she had to sit down immediately. "This isn't normal," she told Ben, her voice laced with worry. They called Dr. Caldwell, who instructed them to come to the hospital immediately. After a series of tests, the doctor confirmed Emma's fears. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," Dr. Caldwell said, her tone grave. "You're showing early signs of preeclampsia. We're going to need to monitor you very closely from now on." Emma nodded, fighting back tears. She couldn't let herself break down. Not now. Later that week, Emma found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror, her once glowing face now pale and tired. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling the subtle kicks of her babies. "Are you okay in there?" she whispered. "Because I'm scared. I'm so scared." In that moment, Emma made a decision. She couldn't control what people thought of her, and she couldn't change the risks she faced, but she could control her determination to keep fighting for Sophia, for Ethan, and for herself. She grabbed a notebook from the shelf and began to write. "Dear babies, today was hard, but every kick reminds me that you're here, and that's all that matters. I promise to keep fighting for you, no matter what." The act of writing brought her a sense of calm she hadn't felt in weeks. It became her nightly ritual, a way to channel her fears and remind herself of her strength. By the end of her second trimester, Emma's resolve had grown stronger, but the challenges continued to mount. Friends and family rallied around her, offering help and encouragement, but the whispers in the community persisted. "Why doesn't she just listen to reason?" someone murmured behind her at the grocery store. "She's putting those babies in danger." Another voice added. Emma straightened her back, forcing herself to hold her head high. They didn't know her story. They didn't know the love she already felt for her children. As she left the store, a woman stopped her near the exit. "I just wanted to say that I think you're incredibly brave," the woman said softly. "I lost a baby years ago, and I'll never stop wondering if I could have done more. What you're doing, it's inspiring." Emma blinked back tears, her voice trembling. "Thank you. That means more than you know." For every critic, there was someone like this woman, a quiet reminder that Emma's fight was worth it. By the time Emma reached 28 weeks, she knew the hardest part of her journey was still ahead, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Ben, her family, and even strangers had shown her that love and hope could outweigh fear and doubt. As she sat on the couch one evening, her journal open on her lap, she wrote, "Dear Sophia and Ethan, you are my miracles. The world may not understand, but I don't need them to. All I need is you." The winter sun hung low in the sky as Emma Carter shuffled into the hospital for her weekly checkup. At 29 weeks, her belly had grown large and unwieldy, a constant reminder of the two lives she was carrying. Ben walked beside her, his arm steadying her as they entered the building. Dr. Caldwell greeted them with her usual calm demeanor, but her eyes betrayed a hint of concern as she reviewed Emma's test results. "Emma," she began, "your blood pressure is climbing again. We're seeing signs of protein in your urine, which confirms the preeclampsia is worsening." Emma's heart sank. She had been dreading this moment. "What does this mean?" Ben asked, his voice steady but tight. "It means we need to admit Emma for monitoring," Dr. Caldwell replied. "At this stage, the priority is ensuring both babies continue to grow and keeping Emma stable. We may need to consider early delivery if things worsen." Emma was moved to a private room in the hospital's maternity ward, the walls painted in calming pastel tones that did little to ease her anxiety. Ben stayed by her side, holding her hand as the nurses set up monitors to track her blood pressure and the baby's heart rates. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered as they sat in the quiet room. Ben frowned. "What are you sorry for?" "For all of this," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "For putting you through this. For putting them through this." Ben knelt beside her, his hands resting gently on her swollen belly. "Emma, you have nothing to apologize for. You're doing everything you can for our family. And I'm here, every step of the way." The days in the hospital stretched endlessly. Emma tried to distract herself with books, TV shows, and the comforting rhythm of writing in her journal. But the constant hum of monitors and the occasional sharp pain in her abdomen kept her on edge. Her mother, Linda, visited daily, bringing homemade meals and words of encouragement. But it was Diane's visit one afternoon that brought tension into the room. "You're looking pale," Diane said bluntly as she set a small bouquet of flowers on the bedside table. "Are the doctors doing everything they can?" Emma forced a polite smile. "They're monitoring me closely. That's all they can do for now." Diane sat down in the chair beside the bed, her expression unreadable. "Emma, I've been thinking about what we discussed earlier, about the risks." Emma stiffened. "I've already made my decision." "Diane." "I know," Diane said, her voice softening slightly. "But I need you to understand that I'm not trying to hurt you. I just want you to be here for Ben. For the babies. You're the glue holding this family together." Emma's throat tightened as she looked at her mother-in-law. For the first time, Diane's words felt less like criticism and more like fear. "I'm scared too," Emma admitted, her voice cracking. "Every day, I'm scared, but I have to believe they can make it. Both of them." Diane reached out hesitantly, placing her hand over Emma's. "I don't understand everything you're going through, but I see how much you love them. That love is stronger than any risk." That night, Emma was woken by a sharp, stabbing pain in her abdomen. Her breath caught as another wave of pain followed, radiating through her body. "Ben," she gasped, clutching his arm. Ben shot up from the chair where he had been dozing. "What's wrong?" "I think something's happening," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Ben rushed to call a nurse, and within minutes, Dr. Caldwell was by Emma's side. "We're seeing signs of placental abruption," Dr. Caldwell said after a quick examination. "We need to deliver the babies immediately." Emma's heart raced as the room filled with activity. Nurses prepared her for an emergency cesarean section, and Ben was handed a surgical gown. "Will they be okay?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Caldwell paused, her gaze steady. "We're going to do everything we can for you and the babies." The operating room was cold and sterile, the bright lights casting harsh shadows on the faces of the medical team. Emma clung to Ben's hand as the procedure began, her body trembling with both fear and the effects of the anesthesia. Moments later, the first cry pierced the air. "It's the girl," one of the nurses announced, holding up a tiny, wriggling baby. "She's breathing on her own." Emma let out a sob of relief as the baby was placed briefly on her chest before being whisked away to the NICU. But there was no immediate cry from the second baby. The tension in the room grew thick as the medical team worked frantically. "He's struggling," Dr. Caldwell said, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to intubate." Emma felt her chest tighten as she turned to Ben, tears streaming down her face. "Is he going to make it?" she whispered. "He's in good hands," Ben said, though his voice wavered. "He's a fighter, Emma, just like his mom." Hours later, Emma lay in her hospital bed, her body sore and her heart heavy. Linda sat beside her, stroking her hair, while Ben paced the room, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. A nurse entered, smiling warmly. "The girl is stable and doing well in the NICU. She's already showing strong vitals." "And the boy?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "He's stable, but he'll need extra support. His lungs are underdeveloped, and we're keeping a close eye on him." Emma nodded, relief mingling with a fresh wave of worry. She had brought them into the world, but their fight was just beginning. That evening, as Emma lay awake in the quiet hospital room, Ben sat beside her, holding her hand. "Do you think they'll understand one day?" she asked softly. Ben frowned. "Understand what?" "How much we fought for them. How much we love them." Ben leaned down, kissing her forehead. "They'll know, Emma. They'll feel it every day." Emma closed her eyes, her exhaustion finally overtaking her. But even in her dreams, she felt the weight of her love for her two tiny fighters. The sterile hum of machines filled Emma Carter's hospital room as she lay recovering from the emergency cesarean section. Despite the haze of exhaustion, her thoughts remained firmly with her newborns, now fighting for their lives in the NICU. "Do you want to see the babies?" a nurse asked gently, peeking into the room. Emma nodded weakly. "Yes, please." Ben helped her into a wheelchair, his hands steadying her as they made their way down the hallway. The NICU was a stark contrast to the chaos of the delivery room, quiet but tense, with monitors beeping softly and incubators lining the walls. The first stop was Sophia's station. She lay bundled in a warm cocoon, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. Emma's heart swelled as she reached through the incubator's opening to touch her daughter's hand. "She's perfect," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's doing great." A nurse reassured her. "She's breathing on her own and responding well to care. A real fighter." Emma nodded, her relief tempered by the knowledge that her son, Ethan, was in a far more precarious condition. At Ethan's station, Emma's breath caught. His small body was nearly lost among the tubes and wires keeping him alive. The ventilator hissed softly, its rhythm steady but fragile. "He's stable," Dr. Caldwell said, appearing beside them, "but his lungs are very underdeveloped. We're using a surfactant therapy to help him breathe, but he may need additional procedures." Emma placed her hand gently on the incubator's glass, her voice trembling. "Will he be okay?" Dr. Caldwell's gaze softened. "It's too early to tell. The next 48 hours will be critical. He's in the best possible hands, but we need to prepare for all outcomes." That evening, back in her room, Emma couldn't stop replaying the scene in her mind. Ethan's tiny, fragile body struggling against overwhelming odds. "I feel so helpless," she confessed to Ben. "You're not helpless," Ben said firmly. "You're here. You're fighting for them every second, just by being their mom." Emma nodded, though doubt lingered. That night, she opened her journal and began to write. "Dear Ethan, today I saw you for the first time, and you took my breath away. You're so small, but I can already tell you're a fighter. I promise to be strong for you, just like you're being strong for me. You're not alone. You'll never be alone." The next morning, Dr. Caldwell called Emma and Ben in for a consultation. "We need to discuss a procedure for Ethan," she said. "His lungs are struggling, and we believe a small surgical intervention could improve his chances. But it comes with risks." "What kind of risks?" Ben asked, his jaw tightening. "There's a possibility of infection or complications during the procedure," Dr. Caldwell explained. "But without it, his chances of survival decrease significantly." Emma and Ben exchanged a long, heavy look. The decision felt impossible. Risk the procedure or watch Ethan continue to struggle. "What would you do?" Emma asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Caldwell hesitated. "If he were my child, I'd proceed. He's shown us he's a fighter. I believe he can handle it." That night, Emma sat beside Ethan's incubator, her heart aching as she watched his tiny chest rise and fall. "Hey, sweet boy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Tomorrow's a big day. You're going to have a little help to make those lungs stronger. I know you can do it. You're the strongest person I know." Ben placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "We'll get through this, Emma, together." Emma nodded, though the weight of fear pressed heavily on her chest. The next morning, the NICU was a flurry of activity as the medical team prepared Ethan for the procedure. Emma kissed her fingers and pressed them to the glass of his incubator. "Be brave, my love," she whispered. The hours that followed were agonizing. Emma and Ben sat in the family room, the silence between them broken only by the occasional buzz of Ben's phone or the shuffle of nurses passing by. Finally, Dr. Caldwell entered the room, her expression calm. "The procedure went well," she said. "Ethan is stable and already showing signs of improvement. He's not out of the woods yet, but this is a positive step." Relief flooded through Emma, and she burst into tears as Ben pulled her into his arms. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. Over the next week, Ethan's progress was slow but steady. The ventilator settings were gradually lowered, and his oxygen levels improved. Each small victory felt monumental. One afternoon, a nurse approached Emma as she sat beside Ethan's incubator. "Would you like to hold him?" the nurse asked with a warm smile. Emma's breath caught. "Can I?" The nurse nodded. "He's stable enough now. Skin-to-skin contact can help him recover even faster." Carefully, the nurse lifted Ethan from the incubator and placed him gently on Emma's chest. His tiny body felt impossibly light, but the warmth of his skin against hers was overwhelming. "Hi, my sweet boy," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting so long for this." Ben stood beside her, his own eyes glistening. "Look at him," he said softly. "He's perfect." That night, as Emma wrote in her journal, she reflected on the incredible strength of her children. "Dear Sophia and Ethan, today I held you both for the first time. It felt like the world stopped, like nothing else mattered. You've already taught me so much about love and resilience. I'll never stop fighting for you. Never." The NICU had become Emma and Ben's second home, a place where time seemed to stretch endlessly and every beep of a monitor carried the weight of a heartbeat. Each day brought a mix of progress and setbacks, a delicate balance that tested their resolve. Sophia continued to thrive. Her tiny lungs had grown stronger, and she no longer needed the oxygen tube. The nurses often commented on her determination, calling her "little warrior." Emma found herself smiling more when she was with Sophia, but her joy was always tinged with worry for Ethan. Ethan remained fragile. Despite the success of the procedure, his recovery was slow, and his weight gain was minimal. Dr. Caldwell scheduled frequent meetings with Emma and Ben, her updates measured but cautiously optimistic. "He's responding well to treatment," she explained one afternoon, "but his lungs are still delicate. We'll need to monitor him closely for signs of infection or complications." Emma nodded, though the weight of those words lingered in her chest. One evening, as Emma sat beside Ethan's incubator, a nurse approached with a concerned expression. "His breathing seems more labored today," the nurse said. "We've adjusted his ventilator settings and are running some tests to rule out an infection." Emma's heart sank. She reached through the opening of the incubator, her fingers brushing against Ethan's tiny hand. "Hey, little one," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've come so far. Just keep fighting. Okay, Mommy's right here." Hours later, Dr. Caldwell entered the NICU with the test results. "There's no infection," she said, offering a small smile, "but we're adjusting his care plan to give his lungs more support as they develop. He's stable, Emma. He's still fighting." Relief washed over Emma, and she slumped back in her chair, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, despite the setbacks. Moments of hope and joy began to shine through. One afternoon, as Emma sat by Ethan's side, a nurse brought over a small knitted hat. "This is for him," the nurse said with a smile. "A gift from one of our volunteers." The hat was bright blue, with tiny stars stitched into the fabric. The nurse carefully placed it on Ethan's head, the sight of it making Emma laugh through her tears. "It's perfect," she said softly, stroking Ethan's hand. "You're perfect." Meanwhile, Ben juggled his responsibilities at home with visits to the hospital. He spent hours with Sophia, marveling at her progress and cherishing the moments they had together. But the strain of being apart from Ethan weighed heavily on him. One evening, as Emma rested in her hospital room, Ben returned from the NICU with a rare smile. "He squeezed my finger today," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It was so small, but it was there. He's fighting." "Emma," He's going to make it. Emma's heart swelled with pride and hope. He's amazing, she said softly. They both are. By the end of the week, Ethan began to show signs of improvement. His oxygen levels stabilized, and he tolerated feedings better. Dr. Caldwell even mentioned the possibility of removing his ventilator soon, a milestone Emma and Ben had been praying for. He's meeting the criteria, Dr. Caldwell explained during a morning update. If everything continues to go well, we could try taking him off the ventilator in a few days. Emma's excitement was tempered by apprehension. Is he ready for that? She asked. We wouldn't suggest it if we didn't believe he could handle it. Dr. Caldwell reassured her. The day of the ventilator removal was a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Emma and Ben sat by Ethan's side as the medical team prepared for the procedure. They held hands tightly, their eyes never leaving their son. When the ventilator was finally removed, Ethan let out a small, raspy cry. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and tears streamed down her face. He's doing it, she whispered. He's really doing it. Ben kissed her forehead, his own tears falling freely. He's incredible, he said, just like his mom. Later that evening, as Emma cradled Ethan in her arms, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. You've come so far, my sweet boy, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. Ben sat beside her, holding Sophia, who cooed softly in his arms. For the first time, their family felt whole, even if only for a fleeting moment. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, her heart full of gratitude. Dear Sophia and Ethan, today was a day I'll never forget. Watching you both grow and fight reminds me of how strong you are. You've taught me more about love and resilience than I ever thought possible. I can't wait for the day when we're all home together. Until then, I'll keep fighting for you, just like you're fighting for me. The early morning sunlight streamed through the NICU's large windows, casting a warm glow over the rows of incubators. Emma sat by Sophia's crib, watching her daughter sleep peacefully at just over 4 pounds. Sophia had reached a major milestone. She's ready to go home, Dr. Caldwell said with a smile during the morning rounds. Her vitals are strong, and she no longer needs supplemental oxygen. She's hit all the marks we were waiting for. Emma's heart soared. She had been dreaming of this moment for weeks, but her joy was tempered by the ache of leaving Ethan behind. The day of Sophia's discharge was filled with mixed emotions. Nurses congratulated Emma and Ben as they carefully dressed their daughter in a tiny pink onesie and tucked her into the car seat. She feels so light, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face as she adjusted the straps. She's perfect, Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. Before leaving, Emma stopped by Ethan's incubator. He had shown steady progress since coming off the ventilator, but he still needed more time in the NICU. I'll be back soon, sweet boy, Emma whispered, her hand resting on the glass. Keep fighting, okay? Mommy loves you. Back at home, the house was both familiar and foreign. The nursery, once a symbol of hope and anticipation, now felt eerily quiet with only one crib occupied. Sophia brought light back into their lives. Her tiny cries filled the rooms, and Emma and Ben found themselves falling into a rhythm of feedings, diaper changes, and snuggles. But even amidst the joy of having Sophia home, Emma's thoughts were never far from Ethan. Every time she looked at Sophia, she felt a pang of guilt, wondering if Ethan missed her or felt abandoned. I feel like I'm failing him, Emma confessed to Ben one evening as they sat in the living room, rocking Sophia to sleep. You're not failing anyone, Ben said, his tone firm but gentle. You're doing everything you can for both of them. Ethan knows how much you love him, even if you can't be there every second. Emma nodded, though the ache in her chest remained. The next morning, Emma returned to the NICU. Unable to stay away, the nurses greeted her warmly, updating her on Ethan's progress. He's tolerating feedings better, one nurse said, and his weight is up by 3 ounces. Emma's face lit up. That's wonderful, she said, leaning over to touch Ethan's hand. You're doing so well, my sweet boy. Later, Dr. Caldwell joined Emma at Ethan's bedside. "He's making steady progress," she said. "If he continues on this trajectory, we could be looking at a discharge date in a few weeks." Emma felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. In the following days, Emma split her time between home and the hospital. Eleanor, Ben's mother, stepped in to help with Sophia, her earlier doubts about Emma's decisions now replaced with admiration for her strength. "You're doing an amazing job, Emma," Eleanor said one afternoon as she rocked Sophia in the nursery. "Ethan will be home before you know it, and your family will be whole." Emma smiled faintly, grateful for the support but acutely aware of the waiting game ahead. Finally, the day came when Dr. Caldwell confirmed Ethan's discharge. "He's ready," she said during the morning rounds. "His lungs are strong, his weight is solid, and he no longer needs constant monitoring. We'll give you instructions for his care at home, but I have no doubt he'll thrive with you." Emma's breath caught. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Caldwell nodded. "He's shown us he's a fighter. Emma, you've done everything right." Emma and Ben arrived at the hospital early that morning. Eager but nervous, the nurses showed them how to use the portable oxygen monitor and walked them through the additional care Ethan would need at home. "You've got this," one nurse said with a reassuring smile. "You've been by his side every step of the way. He's lucky to have you." When the moment came to place Ethan in his car seat, Emma's hands trembled. "You're coming home, sweet boy," she whispered as she fastened the straps. "We've been waiting for this day for so long." As they pulled into the driveway, Eleanor was waiting on the porch, her face lighting up when she saw them step out of the car. "You did it," she said, rushing to greet them. "Your family is finally all together." Emma carried Ethan into the nursery, her steps slow and deliberate. She placed him gently in the crib beside Sophia, her tears falling freely as she adjusted the blanket around him. "Welcome home," she whispered. "This is where you belong." Ben stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "They're here," he said softly. "Our miracles." That night, as Emma sat in the nursery watching her two babies sleep, she opened her journal and began to write. "Dear Sophia and Ethan, today was the day I've been dreaming of. Seeing you together, safe and sound, fills my heart with more love than I ever thought possible. You've both fought so hard to be here, and I promise to give you the world. You are my miracles, and I will never stop fighting for you." The house was alive with the sounds of newborn cries and soft lullabies as Emma and Ben settled into life with both babies at home. Sophia, ever curious, had quickly adapted to the bustling energy of their new routine, while Ethan remained quieter, his tiny frame a reminder of the battles he had fought. For a few days, life felt almost normal. Emma reveled in the simple joys of having her children under one roof. Morning feedings, afternoon naps, and quiet evenings spent rocking them to sleep. But the fragile peace was short-lived. One evening, as Emma prepared Ethan for bed, she noticed something unusual. His breaths were shallow and uneven, his tiny chest rising and falling in erratic spurts. "Ben," she called, her voice edged with panic. Ben appeared instantly, his face tightening as he saw Ethan's labored breathing. "I'll call Dr. Caldwell," he said, grabbing his phone. Dr. Caldwell's calm voice on the other end was a lifeline. "Bring him in immediately," she instructed. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Emma sat in the back seat with Ethan, her hand gently resting on his chest, whispering reassurances through her tears. "It's okay, sweet boy. Mommy's here. Just hold on." By the time they arrived at the emergency room, Ethan's breathing had become more labored. The medical team moved quickly, whisking him into a treatment room as Emma and Ben were left to wait in a quiet, sterile hallway. Hours later, Dr. Caldwell emerged with an update. "Ethan's lungs are struggling to keep up with his growth," she explained. "It's a lingering complication from his premature birth. We're going to need to perform another procedure to expand his airways and improve his breathing." Emma's heart sank. "How dangerous is it?" "There are risks," Dr. Caldwell admitted. But without it, his condition will continue to worsen. We've caught this early, and I believe he's strong enough to handle it. Emma and Ben exchanged a long look, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on their shoulders. That night, Emma sat beside Ethan's hospital crib, watching the rise and fall of his tiny chest. She reached through the bars to touch his hand, her voice breaking as she spoke. "You've already been through so much, my sweet boy. I wish I could take this from you, but I can't. All I can do is be here. You're the bravest person I know." Ben placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "He's going to make it, Emma. He's a fighter, just like you." The morning of the procedure arrived too quickly. Emma kissed Ethan's forehead as the nurses prepared to take him to the operating room. "Be brave, my love," she whispered. "We'll be right here, waiting for you." The hours in the waiting room stretched endlessly. Emma clutched her journal, her knuckles white as she tried to keep her emotions in check. "I hate this," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I hate that he has to go through this. I hate that we can't protect him from everything." Ben pulled her close, his own tears threatening to fall. "I know," he said softly, "but he's not alone. He has us, and he has the best care. He's going to be okay." Finally, Dr. Caldwell returned, her expression calm and reassuring. "The procedure went well," she said. "Ethan is stable, and we're already seeing improvements in his breathing. He'll need to stay in the hospital for a few more days, but I'm optimistic." Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. In the days that followed, Ethan continued to show signs of recovery. His breaths became steadier, his energy returning little by little. Emma spent every moment she could by his side, singing softly to him and sharing stories about their life at home. "Your sister misses you," she whispered one afternoon. "We can't wait to have you back with us. Just keep fighting, sweet boy." When the day finally came for Ethan to be discharged again, Emma's heart swelled with both joy and trepidation. She carefully dressed him in the same blue onesie he had worn during his first trip home, adjusting the tiny snaps with trembling hands. "You're coming home for good this time," she said softly. At home, the nursery came alive with the sound of both babies' laughter and cries. Sophia seemed thrilled to have her brother back, often reaching out to touch his face or offering him toys. "They're already inseparable," Ben said one evening as they watched the twins lying side by side on a blanket. Emma smiled, her heart full. It's like they know they belong together. That night, after the twins were tucked into their cribs, Emma opened her journal and began to write, "Dear Ethan, today you came home again, and I feel like my heart is finally whole. You've been through so much, and yet you've fought every step of the way. Watching you and your sister together is the greatest joy of my life. I promise to protect you, to love you, and to remind you every day how strong you are. You are my miracle." Life at home with Sophia and Ethan was a whirlwind of feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. Despite the chaos, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude every time she looked at her two children. They had come so far, and their bond was growing stronger each day. Ethan's recovery continued steadily, though he still required regular checkups and occasional breathing support. His progress was undeniable. His laughter began to fill the house, a soft, bubbling sound that made Emma's heart swell. Sophia, ever curious and active, seemed to take on the role of big sister with ease, often reaching for Ethan's hand or babbling in his direction, as if trying to include him in her discoveries. "They're so connected," Emma marveled one evening as she watched the twins play side by side on a colorful mat. "It's like they've been waiting for this moment." Ben agreed, his voice filled with awe, amidst the joy of their growing family. Emma found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. One afternoon, as the twins napped, she sat at the kitchen table with her journal, flipping through pages filled with raw emotion and heartfelt letters. A particular entry caught her eye, one she had written during a particularly dark moment in the NICU. "Dear Ethan, today was hard. I watched you struggle to breathe, and I felt so helpless. But even in the hardest moments, I see your strength. You are my miracle, and I will never stop believing in you." Emma closed the journal, tears welling in her eyes. She realized that her words, written in moments of fear and hope, could resonate with others facing similar struggles. That evening, she shared her idea with Ben. "I've been thinking about sharing my journal," she said hesitantly. "Maybe it could help other parents going through something like this." Ben set down the toy he had been cleaning and looked at her thoughtfully. "You think you're ready for that?" Emma nodded. "It's scary to put it all out there, but I feel like it's the right thing to do. If our story can inspire even one family, it'll be worth it." Emma began working on a blog, carefully transcribing her journal entries and adding reflections about their journey. She shared stories of the twins' milestones, the support they had received, and the lessons she had learned about resilience and love. Within days, messages began pouring in from readers around the country. "Your story gave me hope during the darkest days of my pregnancy." One woman wrote, "I lost my baby in the NICU, but your words reminded me of the love that will always connect us." Another shared, "Emma was overwhelmed by the response. For every story of struggle and heartbreak, there was also a message of gratitude and hope." One day, she received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from a mother named Rachel, who had followed Emma's blog and felt compelled to reach out. "Dear Emma, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I lost my son at 28 weeks, and for a long time, I felt like no one understood the pain of that experience. Your words reminded me that I'm not alone. Thank you for giving me a piece of hope I thought I'd lost forever." Emma clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, connection and empathy could bring light. As the weeks passed, the twins reached new milestones together. Sophia began crawling first, her determined little hands propelling her across the living room floor. Ethan, ever the observer, watched her closely before attempting his own wobbly movements. One afternoon, as Emma sat on the floor cheering them on, Ethan reached for a toy Sophia held. She handed it to him with a squeal of delight, clapping her hands as if celebrating his success. "They already have such a strong bond," Emma said to Ben later that evening. "It's like they know they're meant to be together." "They are," Ben replied with a smile. "They're proof that miracles can happen." The blog continued to grow, and Emma began receiving invitations to speak at local events about her experiences. Though she was nervous at first, she found comfort in sharing her journey with others. At one event, a woman approached her after her talk, holding a sleeping baby in her arms. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "When I was pregnant, I read your story, and it gave me the strength to keep going. My daughter wouldn't be here without you." Emma was speechless. She reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, her heart swelling with both pride and humility. That night, back at home, Emma sat in the nursery watching the twins sleep. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison, a quiet reminder of how far they had come. She opened her journal and wrote, "Dear Sophia and Ethan, today I was reminded of the power of your story. You've shown me that even the smallest voices can make the biggest impact. Thank you for teaching me what it means to love unconditionally. You are my miracles, and I am so proud to be your mom." The crisp autumn air carried the scent of freshly baked cake, and the laughter of family and friends gathered in the backyard of the Carter home. Emma stood in the center of the activity, her heart swelling with pride as she watched Sophia and Ethan sitting side by side in their high chairs, surrounded by balloons and decorations. Today was their first birthday, a milestone that once seemed impossible. The morning had been a whirlwind of preparations. Emma had carefully selected every detail, from the blue and pink balloons to the tiny crowns the twins wore on their heads. Ben had worked tirelessly to hang streamers and set up the tables, his excitement matching Emma's. "I still can't believe it's been a year," Emma said as she adjusted Sophia's crown. Feels like a lifetime, Ben replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. But in the best way possible. Guests began arriving, their arms full of gifts and warm smiles. Emma's mother, Linda, was among the first, carrying a basket of homemade treats. "You've outdone yourself, Emma," Linda said, surveying the decorations. "This is perfect." Emma smiled. "They deserve it. After everything, they deserve this celebration." Diane arrived shortly after, carrying a carefully wrapped gift. Over the past year, her relationship with Emma had softened, her once critical tone replaced by admiration and support. "You've raised two little miracles," Diane said, placing a hand on Emma's arm. "I'm proud of you, Emma." The words brought tears to Emma's eyes. "Thank you, Diane. That means so much." As the party went on, guests gathered around to watch the twins experience their first taste of cake. The moment was pure chaos. Sophia eagerly smashed her cake with both hands, while Ethan approached his hesitantly, his small fingers poking at the frosting. "Come on, buddy," Ben said with a laugh. "It's your birthday. Go for it." Ethan eventually dug in, his tiny face lighting up as he tasted the sweetness for the first time. The sight brought laughter and cheers from the crowd. Emma captured the moment on her phone, already imagining the stories she would tell them about this day when they were older. Later, as the guests enjoyed cake and drinks, Emma stood to address the crowd. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a piece of paper, but her voice was steady. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. "A year ago, I didn't know if we'd make it to this moment. There were days when I was terrified for my children, for myself, and for what the future might hold. But through it all, there was love. Sophia and Ethan have shown me what it means to fight, to hope, and to believe in miracles. Their strength has inspired me every day, and I am so grateful to each of you for supporting us through this journey." Emma's voice cracked as she looked at the twins, their faces smeared with frosting. "I've kept a journal since the day I found out I was pregnant. Tonight, I want to share a small part of it with you." Emma unfolded a page from her journal, the ink smudged from tears shed during its writing. She began to read, "Dear Sophia and Ethan, today I felt your first kicks, and it reminded me that you're here, you're real. You've already taught me so much about love and courage, and I promise to do everything I can to keep you safe. You are my miracles, and I can't wait to meet you." The crowd fell silent, moved by Emma's words. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. After the party, Emma and Ben tucked the twins into their cribs, their soft breaths filling the quiet nursery. Emma lingered for a moment, watching them sleep. "They're incredible," Ben said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "They are," Emma agreed, "and they've changed our lives in the best way." That night, Emma sat at her desk and opened her journal to a fresh page. The words flowed effortlessly. "Dear Sophia and Ethan, today we celebrated your first birthday. Watching you laugh and play with our friends and family reminded me of how far we've come. A year ago, I was filled with fear and uncertainty. Today, I am filled with gratitude and love. You are my greatest gifts, my sweetest blessings, and my brightest lights. I am so proud of you both, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. Always remember, you are loved beyond measure." The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor on the nightstand. Emma sat in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of the twins' first birthday party. Streamers draped across the chairs, a few deflated balloons resting on the floor, and unopened gifts stacked neatly in a corner. It was late, but she couldn't sleep. Her heart was too full, her mind replaying the day's events, the laughter, the love, and the overwhelming realization of how far they had come. Ben joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, handing her a cup. Emma shook her head, smiling softly, "Just thinking about everything. This past year, it feels like a lifetime ago that we were in the NICU, wondering if they'd ever make it home." Ben nodded, his expression thoughtful. We've been through a lot, but look at them now. They're happy, healthy, and so full of life. It's amazing." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of the tea seeping into their hands as they reflected on their journey. "Do you remember the first time you held Ethan?" Emma asked suddenly. Ben smiled. "Of course. He was so tiny. I was afraid I'd break him. But then he grabbed my finger. And I just knew he was stronger than he looked." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared back then, but he proved us wrong. Didn't he?" "He did," Ben said, his voice steady. "They both did. And so did you, Emma. You never gave up, even when things felt impossible." Later, Emma found herself in the nursery, standing between the twins' cribs. Their soft breaths filled the room, the rhythmic rise and fall of their chests a comforting reminder of their resilience. She leaned over Sophia's crib, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "Good night, my little warrior," she whispered. Moving to Ethan's crib, she placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. "And good night, my sweet fighter." That night, as Emma returned to the living room, she retrieved her journal from the bookshelf. She flipped through its pages, each one a testament to the highs and lows of the past year. When she reached the final blank page, she hesitated for a moment before picking up her pen. "Dear Sophia and Ethan, tonight, as I write this, you are sound asleep, safe and loved in your cribs. 1 year ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. I was filled with fear, wondering if I was strong enough to face the challenges ahead. But every kick, every cry, and every laugh reminded me of why I had to keep going. You have taught me what it means to believe in miracles. You've shown me that love and hope can overcome the darkest days. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. You will always have each other, and you will always have me. I promise to be your biggest cheerleader, your fiercest protector, and your constant source of love. Thank you for being my miracles. You have made my life brighter, fuller, and more meaningful than I ever thought possible. Love always. Mom." Emma set down her pen, closing the journal with a deep breath. The weight of the past year felt lighter now, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and gratitude. As she turned off the lights and headed to bed, she glanced back at the nursery one last time. The sound of her children's breathing was the sweetest melody she had ever heard. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Emma felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, because she had her miracles, and they had her.